Welcome to the Her Voice Shines podcast, where we celebrate the power, brilliance, and resilience of women everywhere. I'm your host, Shanasia Washington. Join us as we share inspiring stories and insights from extraordinary women who have found their voice and are making a difference. Together, we'll create a ripple effect, illuminating the path to visibility and empowerment. Let's break barriers, shatter ceilings, and lift each other up. In each episode, we dive deep into the journeys of women who have turned their challenges into triumphs and their dreams into reality. Whether you're looking for motivation, guidance, or a community that understands your journey, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and remember, let your voice shine. Whoa, we are back with another amazing episode of the Her Voice Shines podcast. I'm your fabulous host, Shanasia Washington, streaming from the beautiful city of Houston, Texas. This you already know. And of course, it's my favorite place to be because we bring you the women with the stories, and they come in this place and they let their voice shine, just as the podcast suggests. And today is no different. Our guest comes to the stage, you know the drill. She tells us her name, where she's streaming from, and she jumps right into that story. Without any further waiting time, here's our fabulous guest for today.
Hello, my name is Terri Brinston. I'm coming to you from Michigan. I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast, and thank you so much for having me, Ms. Washington. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also a certified teacher. I teach high school. I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own business where I work with schools and help them understand their medical related issues, and I do consulting with them. I also have a nonprofit, which is called the Nurturing Wellness Group Foundation, where I work with young people who have barriers that prevent them from being successful. So I'll start my story by telling you about my book. I wrote a book last year. It's called Grateful for the Journey, Surviving COVID-19. Like so many other people that was infected with this particular disease, and we lost so many lives and from this disease as well. When it first came out, the first time that we started having the schools to shut down, I was infected with COVID. And so it was during the time where everything was normal and then everything wasn't. So I was in the hospital for about a month. I was on the ventilator, and I had a lot of issues with brain damage, had scarring lungs. But one of the major things that my book is about is the fact that I lost my memory. I couldn't remember who I was or what I did or why I chose the path that I chose. When I looked at my resume, I was like, okay, this girl is confused. She got a lot going on. What in the world was she trying to do with her life? And so during this process, I was speaking with my counselors and, of course, going to the doctor. And I had my doctor recommended me to start journaling and really start to think about what I remembered and trying to put the pieces together. And so, of course, with my family, my husband and my children and my mother and my sisters and brothers telling me different stories, I was able to start to really piece my life together. But the journey, Grateful for the Journey, is basically about my process of rethinking or remembering my life and the paths that I've taken and the decisions that I have actually taken, good choices and bad choices. But ultimately, this process, this journey of rediscovering who I am and why I made the choices that I made, helped me to really recognize how God had been orchestrating my entire life, opening doors and closing doors. And I really could see his hand in my life. And so that's why the title is Grateful for the Journey, Surviving COVID-19, because through my survival of COVID-19, I was really able to rediscover who I am and what my purpose is in life. And so I'm so forever grateful for that, because what it did is it allowed me to understand why I was a special ed student. I had a learning disability and couldn't read and had very low self-esteem. And so those memories started to come back to me, because I think that, I've since then, of course, I've gained my memory and I'm able to teach again and work again. But during this time before COVID, I started kind of feeling bad about certain decisions that I made and feeling like, maybe I didn't make the best choices in my life and thinking that I should have done this or done that. We all evaluate our lives and our choices that we make. And sometimes we, feel just disappointed in the decisions that we made. But through this journey, it was like, God allowed this to happen for me so that I can truly see that He has been in control the entire time. And I just was just so grateful, and it really allowed me to put a fire under my motivation to really walk out the things that He has placed in my heart. And working with schools through my business, my school nurse, um, helping schools to understand that they have a responsibility in providing support for our youth, and sometimes they don't have the knowledge or the skill set to be able to carry that out. And so what I do with that company is myself and other nurses and medical professionals, we go in and we provide that service. Schools went into education so that they can educate our kids. They're not trying to be nurses and doctors and social workers and all of that. But we have social workers and nurses that are willing and able and knowledgeable to provide that service. And so what we do is we come in there and we do it for them, so that they can get the best quality care for our youth, that they're going to be there the majority of their time. And so that the schools and administrators and the teachers can focus on educating our youth. And we as nurses and support staff can focus on making sure that the policies are in place and that the right people are on the in the facility. So through this experience, grateful for the journey, surviving COVID-19, like I said, it allowed me to really focus on walking out my purpose. And I gave up the pity parties, and I recognized that, man, God is amazing. He orchestrated my entire life so that I can be the person that I am. So thank you for this opportunity to share my story.
It's definitely power when we can pivot from those pity places, because we'll get in those places, oh, why me? Why this happened? But when we
Absolutely.
can really, really learn how to use that as a part of our holistic journey, it just
Mhm.
makes all of the difference. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you this, and I do imagine, by you writing a book about your process, specifically with COVID, I do imagine we'll probably have a lot more literature, come out of this because so many things happen like during
Yes.
that time. You know,
Mhm.
even with this show, like it's always this kind of perspective as it relates to maybe the business and how it's impacted. You're really one of my first guests that are saying like, no, I had something more serious. It
Mhm.
impacted my memory. And that's
Mhm.
big, Terry. That's a big thing. I want to ask you now, as it relates to your memory, where are you kind of with the process? Are you still kind of feeling like you have parts that are coming back? And then
Mhm.
just kind of walk us through that journey of regathering the memory. Did the childhood memories pop in first? Do you remember? Do you remember like the adulthood? Tell us about that because I'm just saying from perspective of losing my memory. I'm like, well, what will come back first? Would it be the childhood stuff? Would it be the just tell us about that so our audience can understand what their process looked like for you.
So the scariest thing is that I've been married. We're celebrating our 33rd year of marriage with my husband, and I didn't remember him or my children. I have two boys. And so the first thing that really came back is about my mom. Like I remember my mom. I remember her phone number, which, nowadays we don't remember phone numbers, but she's had her number forever. But the point, I just remember my mom, and that I didn't remember my brothers and sisters. I have six siblings. So that came back first. And very scary. One of the things that I definitely talk about in the book is that when I woke up, I was in an environment that I didn't know anyone, and I didn't know why I was there. And so I thought I was being trafficked. And so, I was woke up, and I was actually trying to get out the bed and escape because I thought I was being trafficked. You had all of these people around me or walking down the hallway, having all of these gowns and masks on, and nobody would come into the room, and it was very isolating. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've been trafficked. So I tried to escape, and one of the nurses came in, and her and I, as I was screaming and hollering, we locked eyes, and she said, "You don't know where you are." And I go, "No." And so then she said, "You're in the hospital." And that's when she told me. And so at that point, I started to kind of remember, that I had a family, I had a life, but it was kind of gray. I didn't really realize who they were. So after, being in the hospital for so long and FaceTiming people, I started to remember my husband. He was telling me about, my life and my children and things like that. So it was very, very scary, especially because when I went into the hospital, the world was totally normal. And so during this time where I was in the hospital, I was able to look at TV, and they were, things were closed. And, it was just all of this craziness about putting bodies in containers, and, looking for ventilators. And it was like I felt like I woke up in a different time, and that I was desperately trying to figure out, how in the world did I get into this particular time? I want to go back to my life, but I couldn't remember what that was. So it was very, very scary. I had a lot of out of body experiences, especially when I came home, severe anxiety, and I just became very just attached to my husband. I didn't want him to leave from me. He had to stay next to me or within the room. And if he left the room, I was constantly calling him. It was just very, very scary, that transition. And so definitely having family around, meaning calling and FaceTiming, because during that time, everybody wasn't connecting. It really helped, just hearing voices. A lot of times when I got a phone call, I didn't know who it was, but I just kind of went through like the text messages that we've communicated. And I'm like, okay, well, clearly I should know this person, but I didn't. And so that was kind of very difficult for me. And even now, I still struggle with some of my memories. Sometimes, so weird. Someone walked up to me and they said, I was at an event, and she said, "Terry," and I go, "Oh, I'm getting used to that." I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but she knew me by name, so I just kind of, and it never came back. So sometimes it's more so people and situations that I don't remember. And sometimes it gets a little, I get a little sad about that.
Thank you for your transparency in this space. And I say this often on this podcast because it's a place for me to give roses and give them more abundantly.
Mhm.
You have survived a place, and like the old folks say, I don't look like what I've been through, because Miss Terry don't look like Miss Terry don't look like she didn't had a battle with memory loss and all these different things. Because I think about that place. I mean, it was already confusing for us, and we didn't have any issues with memory loss.
Right.
Things were closing down. Work was changing. The kids were out of school. We can't find food. We can't find toilet paper.
Right.
It's just really like confusion on steroids. So to have that coupled with, some memory loss stuff is really like a warrior story, like in itself. Like if you don't tell no more stories, Miss Theory,
That's it.
that's that's a pretty good warrior story. Now, I think connection here, because you said that earlier on in life that you had struggled with some learning disabilities. Do you remember feeling different there? Do you have any memories around how maybe having that learning disability back in the day
Mhm.
felt a certain way? Did those things kind of come back? Because that tends to be a difficult thing, especially like now it's a little bit more talked about. But like back in the day, if you had
Mhm.
a learning disability, it was a very isolating feeling, I can
Yeah,
imagine. So do you
absolutely.
have any memories of that has come back? And how do you kind of work through that?
Right. So oddly enough, I definitely kind of converted back to that person. So what I mean by that is when I was I do remember vividly that part of my life. And so when I started to really connect with that part of my life, I became that young girl again. So I was shy. I was withdrawn. I didn't think people liked me. I was a totally different person, right? And so I kind of converted to that, back to that. And so I had to really fight to really discover that I'm not that special ed student anymore, right? And so that was very, very difficult for me because I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to, there was no way in the world I would be doing an interview with you. So I really converted back to that personality that I fought so hard to get away from. And even now, I kind of have to force myself to, do interviews and to, be in front because I'm the behind the scenes kind of person. And so that's actually, after COVID is when I really relaunched who I was, to really push myself out of this self-conscious or low self-esteem young woman that I was, that came back, so it was kind of odd.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And I wanted to go back there because typically you would, at least I would think, that there was those feelings of kind of being a little bit different were really really strong. So I just was curious to see how that played and showed back up, in
Yeah.
this kind of redefined sense of like memory loss and me redefining myself. So I wanted to make sure that we had the tie there.
Yeah.
Now you talk about your company, which I think this is kind of the first I may have heard of this. I'm not
Okay.
very versed. I want you to kind of walk through it. And if there were other potential nurses or people there in the field that may pique an interest in
Mhm.
like, where do I even start with this kind of a thing? What kind of advice that you give? Because anything I hear something that's kind of unconventional, and it could be just from my limited perspective and view. But
Mhm.
if there's something that I hear that's a little bit different from what I heard, I always want to allow the guests to give more knowledge in the area, and
Mhm.
also to specifically talk about their services a little bit more and where they can find them.
Okay. So, what I do is my name of my company is MSN Consulting Services. That MSN stands for My School Nurse. Like I said earlier, I've been working in education for over 25 years. And one of the things that I discovered at the school that I started my career in, they did not have a school nurse. And so, of course, with me being an RN, I taught a vocational program. But anytime someone was sick or there was some type of issue, dealing with medical related issues, they would come and get me. And of course, that was not my role. I was there to teach. And so I started to really, feel sad for the kids because, if they had a diabetes or asthma attack or different type of ailments at school or they had to take medication or whatever, the secretary, was that was her main responsibility, and bless her heart she did as best as she could, but that wasn't not her role, and so I started to really recognize that throughout our state, throughout the United States, only 78% of schools did not have actual school nurses in the building. And so this was prior to COVID, right? And so now you're starting to see a little bit more responsibility of the school getting social workers on board and more medical professionals because they recognized that they were not ready. So we were kind of above, before the game because we recognized that schools weren't ready for medical issues or to deal with mental health. And so anyway, so I started MSN, My School Nurse, 2017. And what we do is I go into the schools and I help the schools to understand what their responsibility is. They have responsibilities that are based on the law. They have responsibility based on the students and their parents to be able to serve the children in a quality way. because our kids, they come to school and they have a lot of stuff going on, way more than we used to, with the ailments and broken bones and different things like that. And so I help them to get the right policies on board. You know, in the schools, they can't give them medication unless they have proper paperwork. And so I help them to equip them to be able to have the proper paperwork and communicate with their parents and the community. I also subcontract registered nurses and social workers and occupational therapists and speech therapists, and we go in and as the school has that demand, then I make sure that our social workers and our the medical professionals are ready to engage in that environment, because it's a totally different environment. From working in a healthcare industry and working in a school is two different industries. And so sometimes they, there's definitely a gap in how you can operate. So anyway, I bridge that gap through my company. I subcontract those medical professionals, and I also help the schools to be able to transition with those services. And so very excited. And so I'm looking for subcontractors. So if you are a medical professional, we provide services throughout the United States. I go in and I provide consulting so that I let the school know what they need, what they don't need, and if they have things in place, I help them to implement them better, so that they can provide those quality services that they are required to do. A lot of times, another thing that I'm doing, since schools are now, they're getting nurses, but they're not nurse ready. The nurses are going to come in there, or the medical professionals are coming in there, and they are providing care. Well, that's not the only thing you need to do. You need to have the proper paperwork, the proper policies. You have to have certain things ready in order to really provide the care that you need to provide. And so I help schools, I consult with them and help them to understand, well, yeah, you got this nurse, she's providing care, but there's some other things that you need to put in place in order for this to run smoothly. So I help with that as well.
I love it. And thank you so much for sharing and giving us that insight, because, we do have people from all ranges that could potentially be a good fit for what you do. Now, we know that you're still in the classroom, you're working on or you're still in education, and you're working also too on your business. And it's a different animal, of course, being in education and then doing the business. I just want to ask you about, like, really specifically, with maybe it relates to the transition or, getting this to scale bigger. What are the challenges? I mean, and these can be either, personal or professional. What are some of those things that you kind of have to work a little bit harder on, perhaps, to overcome?
Oh wow, many challenges. I'm extremely busy, but I love to work. So I get bored quick. And so having people always say, how are you working full time and running a nonprofit and running a for-profit? One of the challenges I'm having is just getting the right people on the bus, right? I recognize that I have many skills, but I also recognize there's stuff that I don't know. And so getting the right people that have the right passion for what I do, because my roles are people roles, right? I'm working with schools and empowering them. I'm working with students, empowering them, and I'm also a teacher. And so it's very challenging to find the right people. I do have a virtual assistant that is amazing, takes away some of that tedious stuff. But I do have a great team of medical professionals that I work with. My husband is my business partner. I have other business partners that work with me, and so I definitely am not doing it by myself. But I could definitely use more people to work with. So that's one of the major challenges. Another challenge I would say is getting the word out. Sometimes, because it's new, and you were correct, this is a new market. There's not very many people that are going into the school systems and providing the type of service that I'm providing. So getting the word out to schools, because they don't even know that they need it. School administrators are working on educating our kids, and that's what they should be focusing on. But they have a very real responsibility that's dealing with medical health and mental services. And so that is something that I help them to understand. And so they sometimes they don't really recognize they need it. So getting the word out to let them know, getting, so that schools are aware that my services they are there and that I'm ready to help. So that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, I mean, and when I hear things that can like pour into our education system, I always got the antenna up because we all know, you and I both know, and you in the building. So
Yeah.
there are so many different other aspects that we should be thinking about. And
Mhm.
sometimes these teachers in the classroom have to play multiple roles because that particular person or resource is not there available for the child. So I wanted to make sure you talked about that. Now,
Well,
Ms. Terry, no, go
also,
ahead.
if you don't mind, also we have to understand that there's a shortage of educators. And so I have just talked to, I think every teacher that I know is ready to get out of education. COVID really did a whammo on our teachers. They are burnt out, they are stressed out. It's so many different responsibilities. And what happened from COVID, they have even more responsibilities. And so it can become, I mean, we have to be very careful because we're losing our teaching community, our teachers. And also, there's not a lot of people going into education. So there's a decline in that. And I know there's a lot of different methods that we have, homeschool, and we have online learning. But some kids learn best face to face. And so we have to take care of our teachers. And so when we overwhelm them, now they're their counselor, now they're the nurse, and they have they have curriculum that they have to get through. They're burning out and they're leaving in droves. So I just, put that out because, when schools hire people like me, it takes the burden from the teachers. And so we want to take care of our teachers.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love it. And being connected to several people in the education space, I can echo it. They ready to go.
They really,
And that's just the simplest way I can put it. All the things that you said, the burnt out, all of that, it is very real. And it's very real in my circle, and I'm in a whole different city.
mhm,
I don't get to go here often, Miss Terry. And when I do go here, trust me, I am led.
mhm.
I want you to talk about your faith experience since the memory loss into where you've been, because sometimes we go through very traumatic things. It's a faith lift off. I know for me, when my back was up against the wall and I had to make decisions about what I'm going to do, the next thing to feed my family, what I'm going to do, it seemed like that's when my faith walk really had to ignite. I couldn't play with faith anymore, right?
Right.
It had to be one of those things I really tapped into. And I know that your story, somewhere in there, is a testament of faith. So I have to ask you about that and your faith walk, and where have you gone in your faith since having such a, I think, traumatic experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually my faith is the key to the story. The gratitude comes from the fact that God has had his hands on my life. I've always been, I'm a Christian, has been as long as I've known, I've always been a Christian, and I've always have had a strong conviction for my walk with Christ, with Jesus. And so, but after this experience, it was different. I just remember being in the ICU and thinking that I was just gonna die because after I woke up, and it was just such a traumatic, and it was definitely a traumatic experience. I just remember during the entire time of me being on the ventilator, I was on the ventilator for a week and a half. Um, I remember a presence being with me. I couldn't n- tell, I couldn't see it, I didn't hear, he didn't speak to me. I just knew he was with me. I felt like I would explain it like this. I felt like I was just so overwhelmed. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling. And I've never had that feeling before, that I was just so overwhelmed and so helpless that I just could not do it. I just felt like I just couldn't do it. And during that time when I had those feelings, I just felt like I had a very strong sense of relief. And it was like Jesus was just holding me at that time. And I know we hear stuff like that, but I felt that relief uh, of God really just holding me and saying it's going to be okay. So after coming through that, and having I was just fearful. People ask me, were you in pain? No, I wasn't in pain, but I was terrorized. I was so scared. I was just fearful of everything. I was fearful that, when I came home, that they were going to take me back to this being trafficked, because I still in my mind thought that that's where I was. So I was just fearful, and I would have night terrors. And it's very difficult to explain what night. I was just petrified at night, scared to move, and I couldn't sleep flat. I had to sleep in a chair because I couldn't lay down, because I would have these severe panic attacks and coughing fits because my lungs were scarred and I was on oxygen. But I remember very vividly, one night, my husband was, I know I just got on his nerve, girl. I couldn't, I didn't want him out of my sight, but he was sleeping and I didn't want to wake him. And I was in a chair in our bedroom and I was just petrified. And I remember praying and saying, God, I need you to take this from me. And when I said that, I was like, okay, I need you to take it from me like now. And I literally just sat there and waited for him to take it from me. And I think that that was the first time that I really experienced faith in that way, because I was like, he's going to take it from me. And I waited and God took it from me. And I just remembered that evening, I felt such a release of peace that I had never felt before in my life. It was just peace. And going from a state of being petrified, just so scared, and to just peace, was so profound. And so from that time, I can say that I have been really settled in his peace. The world going crazy with this, and me worrying about my career and worrying about my business, there is nothing greater than having the peace of God. And so since then, I've settled in that. You know, I have a grandchild now, and my son lives over in Italy, and we have so much going on in our life that the president election and all of this crazy stuff going on. It's like, when you truly know that there is a God who is in control, um, there's it's very profound, and very I've settled in that. And so there's very little things that bother me now. And so I do believe that I'm a different person. But that finding that peace. So I'm in my spiritual walk, to answer your question, is totally different.
And you said something very powerful, because I think I can even absorb that. You said settled in his peace. It doesn't matter about the chaos. It doesn't matter about the money. It doesn't matter about all these things. There's a certain settling that his peace does. And I'm so happy that you were courageous enough to stand in that and share with these viewers today. I have to tell you, Miss Terri, you gave me a ride today. You gave me a ride, and you gave me a good time. You gave me courage, and you've given me a place that I am aspiring to be in terms of peace.
Amen.
I feel it and I sense it. So I have to thank you on today. All our viewers and our listeners that are listening today, it's been another fabulous episode of the Her Voice Shines podcast. If y'all not over there cheering for Miss Terri, you ought to be. You really, really ought to be. I will never leave here without saying that I love you. Remember to let your voice shine, and we'll be back really in no time with another amazing episode. And we're out.
Yeah.